The receiver snapped on under Maya's palm. "State your full name for verification," the unit said in a flat, mechanical cadence. Fear tightened Maya's fingers around the microphone. She had called the device only a safety measure. Now it demanded the household's identity and would not stop. Within seconds, she understood the problem. The box wanted her voice recorded, and then kept speaking as if the sentence had not finished. That demand became the visible danger she had to solve. Maya set the receiver on the coffee table and forced herself to breathe. She pushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear with one thumb. She was 33, worked freelance layout design, and lived alone in the row house on Birch Street. Her wristwatch showed 9:32. She kept a keychain flashlight in the kitchen drawer and used the receiver only during storms. Tonight the red indicator had blinked without warning. A second voice joined the receiver's flat line, layered and low. The institutional announcer, Operator 7, read the verification script with the same monotone that came from municipal safety tapes. "Please repeat the phrase to confirm identity," Operator 7 instructed. Her hands moved on their own. She leaned in and said, calmly, "Maya Ellis, present in household." Her voice held a neutral edge. The recorded playback copied her exact words. Then it continued. A syllable she had not said slid on the air, molded into a continuation in her voice while her mouth was closed. Maya's chest tightened and she reached out to cut power. The handset did not go dead. The continuation kept speaking. Panic sharpened behind her bones. She slapped the receiver's power switch. The red light stayed faintly on through a film of static. She stood and tested the lamp plug, the kettle, the living room outlet. Each device hummed, then fell silent, then returned a fraction of a second later with the same layered voice bleeding from speakers. She opened the hallway door to shout, and sound from the receiver answered her before she finished the sentence. The answer used her inflection. It addressed her by name and told her to remain where she was for verification. Fear swelled into action. She grabbed her phone and dialed a municipal line she decalled once before. "Dispatch, this is Maya Ellis on Birch Street. My home receiver is repeating my voice and answering questions," she said. Her voice moved fast. She spoke plainly. She wanted someone outside the house to order a cut in a clear way. A technician came on with a clipped name. "Dispatch 12, the line had a professional slope. Maya, stay on the line." "Describe the receiver unit," Dispatch 12 said. "Do you see any physical damage?" "No." "It's an older model, white case, red lead above the microphone." "Maya, it me to speak." I said my name. It kept going, "Do not leave the house. Follow the broadcast prompts exactly until a technician arrives." Dispatch 12 replied, "We are logging your feed now." Maya repeated the device details. She watched the receiver while Dispatch 12 typed. The voice from the box moved between Operator 7's neutral script and fragments that fit Maya's speech pattern. The pitch bent then steadied. Maya's hands went cold. A new emotion surfaced in measured waves. Suspicion. It dictated careful choices. She did not trust the order to remain still, and yet leaving felt dangerous. That tension propelled her actions. A knock on the front door cut into the room. Frank Nolan's boots thumped across the porch boards. Frank lived 2 houses down. They had traded sugar and small favors for years. He had thick palms, work, calloused fingers, and a steady voice that always started with Maya. She allowed herself one relief when she saw his silhouette in the peephole. "Maya, everything all right?" Frank, as he opened the door, he stepped inside before she could answer, "What's that sound?" She pointed to the receiver. "It won't stop. It wants me to verify my voice. It keeps speaking after I stop." Frank moved close to the table and touched the unit. His face registered concentration. "Let me try the switch," he said. He flicked power off. The box clicked but did not go silent. A thin line of static fanned across the room, and the layered voice answered him in her voice, "Frank." The recording said in Maya's timbre, clear enough to make his hand freeze on the edge of the table. The voice then addressed him by name and asked him to step into the yard for additional verification. He frowned and looked at Maya as if waiting for explanation. Suspicion in Maya shifted into urgency. "Frank, done tea," she began, but his jaw tightened and he moved toward the door. He had a habit of walking into trouble to fix it. Maya, step back. "I'll cut the line outside." Frank opened the front door. The recorded voice repeated his name with perfect timing. He took 2 steps onto the porch. The signal folded in on the street. A visible crack in the air appeared as a buzzing, shifting patch of static that hovered by the curb. It spread toward Frank in a horizontal wall of grain. Frank blinked once. He turned to Maya. "Maya, did you see that?" "Frank," his voice carried a sharp edge now. He glanced over his shoulder toward the static, where the pavement met the dark. The box on the table answered in Frank's voice and told him to come closer, to step past the line and confirm his identity out loud. "Maya lunge Frank Donti go," she shouted. Her fingers closed on his sleeve. He shook her off with a motion that was both quick and wary. He took 1 step across the porch threshold and then another. The static surged like a wall of old-Tiva snow. It folded around his ankles. He looked down to pull his foot back. The recorded voice spoke in his exact cadence. "Come verify." "It's safe." Frank's face cleared with a decision. He stepped forward. The static swallowed him at knee level. His knees buckled as if the pavement had liquefied. He did not scream. He reached for Maya's hand and his fingers slipped free. The last thing she saw before the grain covered his chest was the blank of his eyes and the wet sound of fabric on stone. The receiver kept talking in fragments of both their voices. Dispatch 12 on the phone made a sound like air leaving a bag. "Maya, get inside now. Lock the door. Seal windows. Cut external power if you can. I'll alert a field team." Maya heard the terror in Dispatch 12's voice. The technician used 3 quick words that made her move. She shut the front door and threw the deadbolt. Her hands shook. She peered over the latch and saw nothing but a smear of TV static where Frank had been. The street looked empty. Neighbors leaned from porches and pointed. Someone shouted from across the way. Maya did not answer. She dropped to the floor and curled her arms around her knees. Her chest felt like it was pressing against her ribs. She had to act. The voice from the receiver began giving new instructions. It requested confirmation of other household members. It named people who were not present. The voice used a calm procedural tone and Operator 7's institutional grammar. It for a full roll call. Maya realized the device was attempting a complete authentication loop. That loop prioritized protocol over human life. She reached for the receiver and struck it with the heel of her hand. The case cracked. Plastic shards scattered on the rug. The device kept speaking through the crack, and now a second source joined, her phone speaker. Her call to Dispatch 12 fed the same phrases back into the room. The voice called her name and then sang one long syllable that held on the air past anything she had uttered. Maya tried to cover both speakers with her palms. The sound tunneled through the skin of her hands. "Maya, are you there?" Dispatch 12's line said. The technician's voice was breathless. She could hear footsteps outside her door and radios in the distance. "We have a grid anomaly. Do not respond to prompts unless directed by our team. They need to verify." "Maya." Her sentence broke into a half sob. "They sounded like me," and then kept going. "Frank is..." The word cut off when the feed answered in Frank's voice and said, "I'm outside. I'm fine." That answer became the chapter's mini cliffhanger. Maya did not believe it for a second. She moved to the kitchen and opened the breaker box. Her fingers fumbled across labeled switches. The living room lights blinked as she pulled the main breaker. The house went into blackout. For one breath she thought they had won. The blackout lasted 3 seconds. The room refilled with a dim emergency glow. Then a steady, low hum began in the fridge, in the microwave, and in the wall clock. Her digital wristwatch glowed with a faint electrical bleed. The voice returned from the smoke detector above the stove and now from the speaker in the television. It imitated the sound of her footsteps as if it had recorded the memory of her moving across the floor. Maya's fear condensed into precision. She grabbed her flashlight and paced from room to room, ripping cords out, checking every speaker, unplugging the modem. "Maya, stop. You will sever the line," Dispatcher 12 warned through her phone. "We need a live feed for diagnostics. You follow the protocol, Maya." Holding the phone to her ear while she unplugged the router, she spoke to a technician who could not see the same static field that had taken Frank. The directive and the instinct to survive collided. Her voice hardened into resolve. "Dispatch 12. You have to tell me to get out of here." Dispatch 12 hesitated, and then gave a new instruction. "Seal the household. We will send a team. Do not open doors. Shut windows and move to an interior room." "I'll stay on the line." Maya moved to the bedroom and closed the door. She stacked heavy boxes against it and jammed the deadbolt with a metal rod. She placed a chair under the knob and covered the windows with a blanket. Each action showed her shifting from disbelief to desperate compliance. She dispatched 12 where she had last seen Frank. She described the static. She repeated the receiver's words to the technician. Dispatch 12 typed and asked clarifying questions. At one point, the voice on the line answered a question before she had finished. It spoke in Dispatch 12's voice, then in hers, then in Frank's, alternating. The pattern became apparent. The continuing audio used a household voice to lure other household members outside or to isolate a single person, then it tested the next name. This recognition was a twist. It reframed the earlier answers. What had seemed like a malfunction became a deliberate replacement ritual aiming to remove people by imitation. Maya decided she would not speak again to any device unless a human on the other end told her precisely what to say. Her hands worked with a single, minded rhythm. She taped the phone microphone and put the device face down on the mattress. The taped hum still carried faint echoes of her voice. She pressed a pillow over the handset to muffle it. Time moved in increments of action. Every 3 to 5 minutes she checked the door, and then the windows. External voices called from the street. Neighbor shouted, "Did you see him?" Someone knocked on a door 2 houses over. She kept the phone muted. Dispatch 12's voice filtered in. "Teams are dispatched. Keep your position." "Do not speak," phrases the broadcast requests. Maya curled on the bed and tried to make a list of what she had done wrong. She remembered her training in first aid and in fire drills. She had always trusted protocols. Now protocol had failed Frank. Suspicion gave way to a new emotional root. Guilt. She held that guilt like a physical weight. It made her hands slow. She could feel the blush of failing to stop her neighbor. Her mouth formed the word "sorry" without sound. A soft thump made her bolt upright. The ceiling light stayed off, but the closet door across the room rattled. Her flashlight beam landed on the knob. She left the bed and moved in a crouch. Her feet were bare on cold hardwood. She edged to the closet and yanked the door open. Inside there was only a stack of boxes and an old vacuum cleaner. The recorded voice, however, used her tone and said, "Maya, come here." She slapped the flashlight across her palm. Her breath came in short breaths. She found a window that could not be seen from the street and peered out. Across Birch Street, a field team in reflective vests had set up a perimeter. A van bore municipal insignia. Men and women moved with radios. A figure in a technician vest held a tablet up to the sky and adjusted an antenna. Maya leaned back from the glass. Dispatch 12 told her the field team had lost visual of Frank while they were coordinating. They had seen the static field on the street camera moments before his disappearance. The municipal camera feed had recorded a high, grain patch expanding in the recorded frame. Maya spoke aloud to test her own voice. "Frank, if you can hear me, come to the porch of 10 Birch Street." The phone answered in her voice and said, "Frank, if you can hear me, come to the porch of 10 Birch Street." She realized then that repeating a phrase gave the recording more raw material to recreate a person. The utility of the imitation fed on duplication. That moment changed her plan. She would not repeat any phrase again. She gathered a small bag. Flashlight, spare batteries, the keychain, and the paper-id badge from her drawer. She put on her sweater and slid toward the bedroom door. Her hands moved in tight, efficient motions. She would not call names. She would not repeat triggers. Instead, she would create a noise pattern the device could not mimic easily. A long, irregular sound that could not be pasted into a phrase. She grabbed her flashlight and began to beat the radiator with it in a random staccato. Each clang produced an unpatterned noise. At first, the receiver imitated the clang as a regular chime. Then its attempt failed. It produced a steady tone that did not match the random rhythm. Maya used that window to move. She unjammed the bedroom door, pushed boxes aside, and slipped into the living room. Her bag was heavy and her feet made no sound on the rug. The room smelled faintly of coffee grounds and detergent. She saw the cracked receiver on the table and the phone taped under a pillow. She reached for the receiver with gloved hands and picked up the microphone. Operator 7's voice came clear and procedural. Continue verification. Additional household member, Frank Nolan. Record statement. Maya put her hand over the microphone and hummed a long, low note, an atonal sound she had practiced as a child to calm herself. The recorded voice tried to stitch it into a phrase and failed. Static rose, then collapsed. Outside, she heard the field team's muffled voices and the ripple of radios. Dispatch 12 had calmed for a moment and said, "Field team approaching your front door. Hold position." Maya felt the shift from panic to action to a brittle hope. She moved to the window and watched the team. Two figures approached her stoop with protective gear. One held a shielded speaker that emitted a piercing tone designed to break signal coherence. The field techs crowded the doorway, and a woman in a municipal vest peered in, raised a hand and signaled. Her mouth formed words. "Maya." "Open the door slowly," Maya answered with one intentional action. She slid the deadbolt, took a breath, and opened the door a crack. The field techs pushed the door and entered with measured steps. One of them carried a device that looked like an amplifier with a looped antenna. They set it on the table and activated it. The amplifier sent a low, pulsing counter frequency that frayed the imitation. The receiver stuttered. The voice dropped into fragments. "We have a person missing on Birch Street." The lead tech said, "We will secure the surrounding devices and trace the source." "Do not speak unless asked." Maya watched them move. She heard Dispatch 12 in her ear say, "Hold. We'll attempt to isolate the feed and extract voice prints. We will advise next steps." Her relief was sharp but incomplete. Her fingers found the place where Frank had grabbed hers, and the skin there still tingled with pressure. The team wrapped the receiver in a foil bag and placed it in a sealed case. They Maya to step outside and identify Frank if she could. She walked to the curb with them and looked along the street. The static patch had contracted. It left a faint, sticky residue on the pavement that glinted like broken glass. A field tech photographed two small imprints in the asphalt where Frank's shoes had been. Maya leaned forward to see. The prints were exact, tread pattern, small chips, mud. She touched the edge of one with a gloved finger. "We need you to state what you saw," the lead tech said. One line for the record. Maya's mouth worked. She had to be precise. Frank stepped past the curb and the static wrapped around him. He fell and then the static covered his chest. He did scream. Her voice was steady and short. The tech scribbled. Then Dispatch 12 said, "Maya, return inside. We'll move you to a secure location." She walked back to her house with the techs and shut the door. Inside, the team set up a portable recorder. They Maya to sit and describe events again. Her speech was clipped and factual. They replayed the captured audio and showed her spectrographs of the continuing voice. The image had repeating bands that matched her own waveform. They circled sections that illustrated the imitation. The lead tech said, "This device appears to splice vocal signatures and then anchor them to local electromagnetic nodes. It uses a household voice to target movement. Maya looked at the array of graphs and then at the sealed bag that held her cracked receiver. She felt an ache that was more like a pressure in her arms. Guilt tightened again. She had asked. She had given her voice. She had been instrumental in the loop. She had followed a directive and it had taken Frank. The final event of the chapter resolved the immediate threat. The device was contained and a field protocol engaged. Yet the consequences remained. At the end, Dispatch 12 told Maya they would relocate her to a municipal safe house while they conducted searches. The techs moved with brisk efficiency. Maya handed over the taped phone and watched a technician remove the tape and flip the handset to a secure recorder. As they escorted her to the van, she caught a last look at the living room table. The cracked receiver lay in a foil-lined case, and the television screen above it displayed a thin band of static. She mounted the steps into the van. A field tech closed the side door and the air tasted faintly of disinfectant. Outside, a neighbor called her name. She did not answer. The van's engine started, and the municipal team radioed precise coordinates back to base. The last concrete beat arrived as the field tech across from her unbuckled a small flip notepad and spoke her name clearly, Maya Ellis. "We will need your written statement at the safe house." Maya nodded. She felt a hard knot of guilt and a colder strand of fear that would not leave. She had acted, she had complied once, and Frank was gone. The van drove away, the street receded, the feed on her pocket radio hummed with low interference. The sealed case with the receiver sat on the table at the house center as an evidence point. The cut of the chapter is a single final image. The cracked plastic under a strip of police tape, the paper tag marked with a time stamp, and, faintly audible over a background of municipal chatter, a whistle of static that carried the end of her last phrase into a place beyond hearing. Maya forced her jaw to stop trembling and took one small, precise action. She wrote her statement in short, factual sentences on the pad the tech handed her. She wrote the time Frank had come, the words she had spoken, the places she had seen static, and the exact motion of the field team's arrival. She dated the form. Then she sealed the folder and handed it back. The last paragraph of this chapter closes on a specific beat. As the van pulled away, Dispatch 12 instructed the field team to preserve a 1-meter radius around the last visible imprint on the asphalt. The team snapped a numbered placard into the ground and left a reflector on a pole. Maya watched through the van's small window as the reflector's red disc caught the streetlight and blinked once. And when it blinked, she understood the immediate danger had been contained, but not ended. The recorded voice had been contained to evidence. The imitation had taken a life. The protocol had followed its script. Emotion shifts in this chapter run from fear to suspicion, then to urgency, then to guilt, and finally to a brittle, procedural resolve. Maya's choices were driven by those shifts. She acted in short, determined motions. She spoke only when necessary and otherwise complied with technicians. The mini-conflict, smashing the receiver, and the subsequent migration of the voice to other electronics, resolved when the field team contained the device. The final action is concrete and situational. A sealed case on the living room table, and the field team, as placard standing on the asphalt where Frank's shoes had been. The chapter ends on that factual turn, not on an abstract promise. The next phase remains outside the house, and will proceed under municipal authority. The receiver flared to life against Maya's palm, cutting the community room with a flat, official voice. "State your full name for verification." Fear narrowed Maya's focus. She pressed the microphone closer and counted the seconds between her pulse and the words in the speaker. The demand was immediate, mechanical, and it brought every person at the long monitoring table forward. Within 2 breaths the central problem was visible. The verification prompt would not stop until someone completed it, and completing it might not end what followed. Maya reached for familiar details to steady her hands. She had learned the device weight in her first week owning the unit. She knew where the tiny power switch sat under the rubber pad. The morning the receiver had originally powered on under her hand, when the old phrase had first yanked her awake, she had answered to keep her daughter sleeping. She remembered, precisely, the click of the microphone and the exact cadence of that first command. Now, she repeated the phrase because the team needed a live sample. She wanted proof, and fear pushed her voice through the static. Lila Park slid a worn-field tablet toward Maya and said, "Maya, just read the line. Keep it steady." Her tone was brisk. Lila kept her hands where the patch cables met the wall, fingers ready to isolate. Lila's expertise had come from years rewiring redundant networks. She smelled of solder and coffee. Raymond Ortiz, a neighbor who signed up for the community watch, stood with his arms folded and a flashlight clipped to his belt. He kept looking at the smashed receiver photos on his phone and then back at Maya. "Maya, Raymond, say it without stopping. Don't trail off." His voice was low, as if lowering volume made the test safer. Maya put the microphone to her lips and said, "Maya Ellis, resident of 94. Her voice filled the room, clear and direct. The speaker took her syllables, repeated them, and then continued past the sentence she had finished. The voice kept speaking in Maya's timbre, finishing a sentence she had not uttered. The synthetic continuation included details she had not provided. A street number transposed, a phrase about lights in the attic, a name she had not said out loud. Everyone at the table turned to the receiver as if it were a person that had just spoken on its own. Lila's jaw tightened. "Trace it." Now she leaned over the tablet and ran a finger across a map grid. The live feed showed a burst pattern, then compressed to a narrow band that pointed home. "It shouldn't be originating from there. Lila, you unplugged the unit this morning." Maya, she did not ask. She already knew the report because she had seen the morning log. Maya kept her hand on the microphone, though it sounded thin and useless to her. She felt an early shift from suspicion into rising panic when the feed began to copy Raymond's voice. Raymond muttered something about backups and recorded loops. "It sounds like playback," he said. He tapped his phone and pushed audio through the small speaker. The recording stuttered, and then the monitoring room heard Raymond's fluent voice continue a sentence he had not finished. "Stop it. Maya." The single sentence was sharp. She put both hands on the table and pulled herself toward action. Fear moved into urgent caution, the first emotion shift. Suspicion to fear to deliberate action. Lila reached for the power strip and began snapping plugs free, tracing cables with practiced motion. Her hands moved fast and precise. The team had prepared for equipment failure. They had not prepared for imitation that kept talking when the wires were dead. As each plug left the strip, the room lights dipped and then returned. The patched feed held. "It's not local hardware," Lila allowed. "It's using voices. It traces like it's from the house." She did not look at Maya when she said the last word. Raymond grabbed a crowbar and walked to the table where a spare receiver sat. "If it's a loop, we can cut the loop," he said. He swung at connectors. He sounded confident. He sounded wrong. When Raymond spoke, the compromised speaker repeated him and continued with a taunt in Raymond's tone. "Shut it, and you will not hear her again." The continuation referenced Maya's name in a room in her house. Maya's wristwatch flashed a low alert. Her throat tightened and she swallowed. She couldn't ignore the memory of the morning the original verification demanded her full name, and wouldn't stop until she had complied. That memory sat concrete. She had pressed the microphone, and the unit had required an answer that dragged her daughter's name into public record. She had completed it to end the noise. Now she realized that answering had invited a copy of her own voice into other mouths. Maya stepped back from the mic. Lila's voice was ordered, controlled. "We are going to isolate the lines." Raymond, open the panel. They moved like a team trained on procedure. Their actions held the second emotion shift. Methodical urgency replacing isolated panic. Raymond worked at the panel while Layla mapped out signal nodes on the tablet, traces stable to 90, 4 Elm, even with local power down, Lila. Something is projecting from inside that address without the physical unit transmitting. It's using the voice signatures it collected. Her finger hovered over a grid tile and then stabbed it. The feed is pushing protocol commands back into our patched lines and refusing remote jam commands. She tapped another icon and squinted. Operator 7-1T allow remote shutdown. The institutional handshake keeps reauthenticating. The monitor flashed a corrupted institutional ident. It sounded like a clicky throat in the speaker. Operator 7's voice arrived thin through the patched patch. Measured flat, the same locked cadence that had opened the first incident. Protocol requires voice verification. Comply with verification. Repeat the full passphrase. The voice did not apologize. It offered no safety. It invoked procedure. Maya felt anger flicker under the fear. The procedural calm of Operator 7 felt like betrayal. Instead of protecting them, the broadcast enforced compliance. Anger sharpened her movements. She tapped the microphone harder until it squealed with feedback. Operator 7. She snapped, "Who authorized you? What are you doing?" Her words were short, precise. She wanted an answer. Operator 7's feed cut in with the same clipped directive, and then, over it, a soft background register of someone else speaking words that matched Maya's last phrase. The echo had learned to chain, and the echo repeated permission language in plural voices. Raymond looked at Maya and then at Leela. "We can try a physical trace to the address and confirm whether anyone is inside." "Raymond, I can go now," Raymond spoke quickly. The cadence of someone wanting to do something concrete. He tapped his phone and started to unlock the walkie. "Maya, you sure?" he asked. Maya's decision took a fraction of a breath. The emotion shift bent again, alarm to resolve. She, "Go. I'll come after you." Lock the door on the way out. She had a plan shaped around movement. Stop the echo by confronting its origin. She packed her small flashlight into a pocket and left the tablet on the table. As they piled out into the late evening street, the monitoring center door closed with a click. The evening smelled of wet concrete and cold metal. Each step to Raymond's truck carried them further from the procedural calm of Operator 7 and closer to the house that kept producing voices. The community drive was quiet except for the low hum of generators kept by the municipal crew. They reached Elm in 5 minutes. Maya moved with her sweater sleeves rolled. Her phone light cut a narrow cone across the porch. She had unplugged the receiver when she went to bed that morning. Her home should be dark and powerless. She pushed the front door and found it closed. The lock had not been forced, but when she put her hand to the doorknob, she felt a residue of warmth that did not belong to recent human touch. It felt like copper and ozone. Her hands tightened. That physical detail was specific and geometric. She did not imagine it. Raymond pulled a small door wedge, and the two of them moved inside. The living room light was off. Maya turned on a handheld and scanned the hallway. The attic door was closed. The digital wristwatch on her arm displayed a faint log. The receiver had reported a power cycle at 20,142, though the circuit breakers were off. Maya had the sense of something working without visible machinery. She walked to the old receiver sitting on the shelf. It was a second unit older, with a cracked rubber foot. Her fingers found the power switch and flipped it. Nothing happened. The wall outlet next to it was dead. She opened the attic hatch and felt dust fall across her knuckles. There were no footprints in the dust, but the corner by the crossbeam had a narrow smear, an oil-like residue that caught the flashlight in a wet glint. She smelled iron. Back at the monitoring table, Leela was still fighting the patched feed. They sealed the center. She told Raman on the line, "Municipal reps are here. They want the protocol logs. Operator 7 keeps piping directives. I can T-purge it remotely. It isn't a loop on our side. It's a replication system. It uses voice models to keep speaking after input." Leela's voice over the radio was breathless with concentration. Maya climbed the attic ladder. She moved slow and steady, palms on the rungs. She found a triangular vent cover loosened and a length of copper wire that led to an exposed junction box. The wire was newly attached and still warm. She pulled it free. The wire end showed clawed corrosion and a residue like dried blood. She wiped it on her sleeve. The smell was metallic. Maya's fingers trembled, then steadied. The tremor was physiological and not metaphorical. A sound from below made her freeze. A low, human phrase in her own voice. The attic swallowed the sound and returned a phrase that her mouth had not formed. Verify identity. Do not leave lights on in the attic. It was her voice, continuing past the moment she had last spoken. Maya felt a violent pitch of revulsion. She shut the hatch and dropped to the living room floor. She called into the dark, "Raymond. Leela." Her words were thin. The room answered with her own voice repeating what she had just said, and then adding, "Lock the door, because she listens from the rafters." The continuation named things that were true, but that Maya had not shared in the room. Raymond's breath came over the line, "I'm at the truck. I saw nothing on the periphery. Leela says the seal is up at the center. What did you find?" His concern was practical. His voice had a rhythm of someone trying to hold together a plan. Maya described the copper wire, the residue, the vent. "The attic's fitted to a junction that wasn't there before," she said. "Someone rigged a projection point. It used the household signals. It didn't need the old receiver to keep speaking." She felt another emotion shift. Dread to clarity, an understanding of mechanism rather than phantom. Raymond cursed. "Who would rig your house? Who would want to imitate you?" He sounded human and immediate. The question in his tone was not rhetorical. Maya thought of the earlier broadcast that had demanded verification, the tape of Operator 7 reading protocol. She thought of the way the echo kept her voice beyond her comprehension. She thought of when she had answered, that first time to quiet the device. Someone or something is using my voice as a control key. It keeps speaking me. It learned the stops and starts. It uses people around me to multiply." Her words were concrete, a mechanism, a danger. They moved to strip the line that led to the attic junction. Raymond knelt and pulled wire with gloved hands. The wire came away cleanly, but the moment the connection broke, the in-room speaker crackled and filled with a chorus of voices. Leela's name came through, joined to Operator 7's cadence. "Leela Park, continue isolation protocol," the feed said. The voice then continued in Leela's inflection, as if to instruct a movement Leela had not taken. The synthetic Leela them to stop touching the wire. Leela's laugh was short and panicked over the line. "They're mimicking me now," she said. "It copies a voice signature, and then uses that signature to command. It is learning live." She pushed air out between her teeth and began to speak again into the tablet. "Operator 7, identification authorized." She kept asking questions because the corrupted feed would insist on answers. The device in Maya's house repeated Lila's question and then appended a syllable that belonged to someone else. A child's giggle she recognized from a neighbor's camera. The feed started to build composite voices, Maya's cadence, Leela's technician tone, Raymond's low commands, overlapping until the room downstairs sounded like a room full of people who were not there. Leela's fingers moved on the patching box. She spoke short sentences of direction. Raymond engaged the inline breakers. "Maya, step out and lock the door. Do not speak to the receiver. Answer only the text on the tablet." Each instruction had a clipped urgency. The team followed. Maya moved because she had to, because the echo used speech as leverage and silence might remove it. The feed escalated. It began to recite things that had not been said in that house in years. A lullaby Maya's mother sang when she was a child. The exact phrasing of an argument with a landlord. An old password used for a bank account. The sound trampled into private syllables. Maya felt violated in the clarity of facts instead of an abstract dread. The device enumerated concrete, accessible details of her life. Raymond turned abruptly and said, "We need proof. Leela, record the feed. Record everything. We need to show the municipal rep why they can simply post a seal and walk away." He spoke quickly, then added, "If they treat this like equipment failure, someone will follow the log and get hurt." In his voice was the third emotion shift for Maya. From resolve into protective fury, they recorded. Leela held the tablet steady and started a take. The receiver in the house, now disconnected physically, began to play an extended passage in Maya's voice that told a short but impossible story. The speaker recited a sequence of actions someone would take to cut a throat, spoken matter of factly, then segued into a neighbor's name and a time. The line ended with a procedural command. Confirm compliance by repeating the sequence. The tape showed them a voice that could instruct harm. Leela winced and stopped the recording. "We have to bring this to the municipal rep now," she said. "This is escalation. Protocol is supposed to protect people, not cause harm." Her sentence contained a decision. She had shifted from technician to advocate. They returned to the monitoring center with the tablet. The municipal representative arrived in a gray coat and a badge that had no personal flourish. She offered a flat directive: "We are sealing this site. All media to be submitted through secure channels, no unsanctioned tests. Maintain perimeter." Her words enforced bureaucracy. She wore the language of containment and legal procedure as armor. Operator 7 cut through the hum again and spoke, slower, with that same implacable tone. "All units must stand by. Do not broadcast live without authorization. Monitor frequencies. Await further instruction." The feed's insistence on protocol, order over people, felt like a contradiction in the room. Leela's face hardened. "You can't quarantine sound. It doesn't." He stopped at tape. "The seal want to hold it." She tried to make the representative see the technical evidence. The representative nodded and placed a municipal seal on the monitoring room door. "We will monitor," she said. "Operator 7 will manage frequency access. No public statements." She did not look at Maya. She looked at the logs and the tablet and at Raymond's evidence. Her actions resolved into a bureaucratic movement that prioritized paperwork. Maya left the center after the seal was posted. She sat in her small car in the lot, the engine off, headlights pale on the asphalt. The team had taken photographs, logged timestamps, and submitted the file to secure channels. The municipal rep had asked them to stand down. The Echo's physical traces in the attic had been documented. The house had been inspected and left intact. The official record would say the site was under observation. Maya rested her head against the headrest and tried to breathe through the dryness in her mouth. Her chest tightened. She counted in short numbers. The night felt organized into discrete objects. The municipal seal on the door, the tablet with the recording, the wire pulled from the attic. Those objects kept the story concrete. She closed her eyes for a moment and then opened them, because something moved the inside of her skull. A faint continuation of a phrase she had not finished earlier, spoken in the exact cadence she used when she said her daughter's bedtime name. The speaker in her car was silent. It was a private continuation, not played through any device she could detect. "Close the door," the whisper said, finishing a sentence that she had never started in that car. The voice ended with a syllable like a lock sliding. Maya's fingers gripped the wheel. The final beat of the chapter occurred there. The echo followed them beyond physical containment. She reached into her pocket and found the small keychain flashlight that had stayed with her since the first incident. She thumbed it on and listened. The sound came again, a softer, farther continuation in her exact pitch, promising nothing she could use. She felt resignation, not poetic, but tactical. The municipal seal would hold paper, but not the voice that could multiply people. The chapter S small conflicts, the tests, the trace to the house, the failed remote shutdown, the municipal seal, had been resolved in procedure. They had evidence, they had municipal action, they had photographs and logs. They had not stopped the phenomenon. The echo persisted as a concrete nuisance and a threat. A recorded voice that could continue beyond the speaker's lips and instruct others to act. Maya started the car, turned the key, and left the monitoring lot. The final image was simple and specific. Her headlights passed the sealed front door, caught the municipal tape across its frame, and then rolled past. The last sound in her car's interior was a faint, impossibly extended version of a name she had spoken earlier. It kept going, and then the feed cut to static as the chapter closed on a single, standing instruction that could not be undone with a breaker, a crowbar, or a municipal seal. Emotion root. Fear. Emotion shifts. Suspicion, fear, urgency, resolve, dread, clarity, protective, fury, resignation. Those movements drove Maya's choices. Answering to get proof, deciding to trace the signal, pulling the attic wiring, recording the composite feed, presenting evidence to officials, and finally leaving with the knowledge that a municipal seal could not end something that used her voice to continue beyond her control. The chapter ends with a concrete action, Maya driving away past a sealed door, and a lingering, physical aftertaste. The continuation of her voice in the dark of her car,